We're going to cover questions for atheists. I'm here to basically prepare you for a battle that's raging all around you. Okay, this battle is for your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit. Your eternal destiny is in the balance. And not only for yours, it's for all your kids, all your family, your friends, your relatives, your co-workers. I mean, they're all in the battle, whether they know it or not. You know, if you're alive on planet Earth, you're in this battle. And this battle is between God's truth and Satan's lies. And it's been raging ever since the Garden of Eden. And big picture here is God loves you, Jesus died for you, so you can go to heaven. Satan hates you and he lies to you so you can go to hell. And you have the freedom to choose who you're going to believe. You're going to believe Jesus. He's the one, he's the good shepherd. He laid down his life for the sheep. He came to give you life and have it more abundantly. He came to give you love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Or you can believe Satan. He goes around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. He's come to steal and to kill and to destroy. You know, and he wants you in hell. And he's the liar and the father of it. And if you will, it's the final exam, multiple choice. A, Jesus, B, Satan. Who are you going to believe? You know, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm pretty sure Jesus is the way to go. Who's with Jesus, all right? Anybody with Satan? No. No, so it's unanimous. Well, not sure if you know this, but they're outside those doors, there are people that rejected what Jesus has done. So they're believing what Satan's doing, Satan said, and they're on their way to hell. So question, what do you do with these people? I mean, do you just say, hey, tough bounce, pal. You know, you're going to hell, I'm going to heaven. You know, that's the way the cookie crumbles. No, Jesus said, you're the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that in your house, or all that are in the house. You know, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Our light is supposed to shine. And he also says, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So our light's supposed to shine, and we're supposed to preach the gospel. So do we say, you know, hey, pal, you know, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth. And the atheist says, well, good for you. No, you don't understand, you know. Moreover, I declare to you the gospel, you know, which I preached unto you and you received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures. And I say, well, good for Jesus. No, you don't understand. The wages of sin is death, but, you know, the wages of sin is death. And he says, well, what's sin? I don't sin. I'm a good person. You know, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. And he goes, well, I don't believe the Bible stuff. And it's like, you're missing it. You know, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. You know, for God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. You know, he that believeth not is condemned, but he that believeth is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And he's just like, who cares? You know, I had one guy tell me Jesus never existed. You know, but you know, it's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. And it's like, hey, what's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true for me. Now leave me alone. So what do? You know, it's like, well, I can go to heaven with a clear conscience. I shared the gospel with him. He didn't accept it. But is that what you want? Because Jesus also says, give not that which is holy unto the dogs. Neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn again and rend you. So we're kind of in a conundrum here. We're supposed to preach the gospel, but we're also not supposed to give that which is holy unto the dogs or cast our pearls before swine. So what do we do in this situation? Now I want to make this real clear. This is not thus saith the Lord. This is just my opinion, okay? Second Opinions, chapter 1. Something for you to consider. Okay, you've heard of the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Okay, you can lead an atheist to the truth, but you can't make him think. Same way. So what do? With the horse, you put salt in his oats. You make him thirst for the water, okay? With the atheist, you make him thirst for the truth. Well, how do you do that? You help him realize he's believing a lie. And how do you do that? You ask him questions. I never argue with an atheist. I just ask questions. You know, wide-eyed and innocent. Hey, how did life begin? You know, where did matter come from? How did consciousness come from matter? You know, what happens when you die? You know, all this. And it helps them to realize they don't have it all figured out. And I've got this one question. I just want to do a quick survey. Are you a mutated animal? If you were asked, are you a mutated animal, how many people would be offended? You know, I would, you know. I mean, not supposed to be, but we're made in the image of God. And if they're calling me a mutated animal, they're calling God a mutated animal. All right? And so why would people think that? Well, it's in the media. They tell us we're animals. You look in their 10th grade biology text, animals, share a common ancestor with primates. Okay? And this is the textbook, St. Cloud State's General Ed, Biology. It should be stressed that none of these features necessarily make us any better than any other species, only different. It talks about how we can talk, we have an opposable thumb, we can walk upright, but we're not any different from any other species. Or we're not any better, we're just different. So we're an animal. They say that we're an animal, okay? How do we get from an animal to a human? By mutations. However, without mutations, organisms could not evolve because mutations are the source of genetic variability in species. So when I'm at St. Cloud State and I've got an atheist in front of me and he's kind of firm in what he believes and he's attacking what I believe, sometimes I'll ask him, are you a mutated animal? Do you believe you're a mutated animal? They have a real hard time answering that. You know, they'll hem and haw about it, but that is what they believe. So that is a valid question. You know, it has everything. It's their belief system. It's their foundation. Now, here's some other questions that you can ask an atheist. You know, is your brain a bag of chemicals? Is that all it is? You know, if you're a mutated animal, your brain's just a bag of chemicals, but cut together randomly. How can you trust any of your thoughts? And that's what upset the atheist in my last talk. He just yells out, perfect, and he storms out of there. And he left in a big scene. And that's not a bad thing. I don't take that as a bad thing. It's like his worldview is shaken and he doesn't like it, so he's thinking about it. Because most of the time they just memorize and conform what they're taught. And here's some real life examples on how questions changed real people. This is Spike Pizzaris. He was with the military space program for years and years. He went in as an atheist and evolutionist, and he came out as a Christian and a creationist. And I said, Spike, what happened? And he said, well, there was a Christian there and a creationist. And I thought, what an idiot. Doesn't he know that science can explain everything without God? And so he started to challenge the Christian. And the Christian had answers. His foundation was firm. It was on a rock. And the Christian started to challenge Spike's foundation. And after a year and a half, his foundation crumbled because it was built on the sand. And I said, hey, Spike, did he ask you any questions that made you just stop and think, made you question your worldview? And he said, yeah. He said, how do you believe in the Big Bang and the laws of physics at the same time? Because they contradict. I do another talk, if you want to see that, it's evolution versus science. But basically, matter from nothing contradicts the first law of dynamics. Things organizing over time instead of falling apart contradict the second law. Stars forming contradicts Boyle's law. And it just goes on and on. I highly recommend, he's got some videos there. And they're called What You're Not Being Taught About the Solar System, or Stars and Galaxies, or the Big Bang. Oh my, if you want to see people grasping at straws, it's the Big Bang. I encourage you, they're $15 a piece. They're at creationastronomy.com, I believe. And so his life was changed because somebody cared enough about him to ask him some questions. And this is Dr. Carl Werner. He's the author of this book, Living Fossils. And he's a doctor. He was in med school. And he was having pizza with one of his classmates. And his classmate said, Carl, what do you think of evolution? And he goes, I believe it. And he said, well, what about the problems with the Big Bang and the laws of physics? And he goes, oh, I didn't realize there were any problems. And then he says, well, what about all these transitional fossils that are supposed to be found and they haven't been? And he goes, oh, I didn't realize they haven't been found. And he goes, how does life begin if proteins can't form naturally? And he's pre-med. He's in med school. He understands biology, he understands chemistry, and he understands proteins do not form naturally. And it's like, whoa, that's a good point. But he didn't give up his faith in evolution. It's like, you know, it's got to be true. It's in all the textbooks, all the museums. It's got to be true. And his friend says, well, why don't you prove it? You know, prove evolution is true. And he goes, okay, I will. Well, and actually in science, you don't prove something true. You try and falsify it. You know, like if you had a theory that all swans are red or all swans are white, you know, everybody could agree with that. All it takes is one black swan to disprove it. And so his premise, he was going to try and falsify evolution. And he said, if evolution is false, the animals in the fossil record should look like the modern animals today. Basically, the modern animals should be identical to their fossil ancestors because evolution hasn't happened. And that's what he found. And he wrote this book. It's Living Fossils. We'll cover more of this tonight. and it's on evolution versus science. But a question you can ask the evolutionist is, why do modern animals have different scientific names than their fossil ancestors, even though they look identically? And this is what, he's got a whole book of that. That's what's in this book. See those two clams? They look identical. See those words in red? Those are the scientific names for those, the genus and the species. The scientists don't think they're the same. They don't think they're the same species. They don't even think they're the same kind of animal. And when you look at a dog, like a wolfhound and a bulldog, you know, a big long nose and a pushed up nose, those are the same species. You can have that much variety within a species, much less genus, and those are the same. So that's a question you can ask him. Gary Parker, he was an atheist at a Christian college. You know, they offered him the job, and he goes, I'm not a Christian. And they go, that's all right, just don't swear. And so his job, he's in biology, and he thought it was his duty to bring these students up into the 21st century and have them forget their belief in goat herders and old books and texts. And he'd have kids crying in his class. And the question that changed his life was a chemistry professor said, hey, you want to come to a Bible study? And Gary said, why would I want to go to a Bible study? I'm an atheist. And the chemistry professor says, free coffee and donuts. And Gary says, I'm in there. And so he went to the Bible study for free coffee and donuts. He went there for a year and a half. And for a year and a half, he was trying to discredit creation. He was doing all these arguments for evolution. And for a year and a half, he was soundly defeated. And so he became a creationist. And he started to teach creation in the biology class. And guess who got mad at him? The theology department. The theology believed in evolution so strong they were getting mad at him, and they challenged him to a debate. And they didn't want him to be, you know, have the underdog status. They had him find 2 more friends. So it was a chemistry guy, and so there was 3 against 3. It was the chemistry department defending creation, and it was the theology department defending evolution. See, that's the problem we have in America. The churches need to stand on the authority of the Word of God, but these churches are run by pastors that come from these seminaries that teach some form of flavor of evolution. And people will say, couldn't God have used evolution to make the world? Well, God could have done anything. I mean, he's God, right? But you know what God can't do is he can't lie. So if God said he did it in 6 days, that's what he did. You know, right smack dab in the middle of Genesis 20:11, or Exodus 20:11, in the middle of our 10 commandments, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. He wrote that with his finger. He didn't stutter. So this isn't a matter of what God could have done. It's a matter of what God said it did. And the real question is, are you going to believe what God said? And if we could just get our churches or our seminaries to go along with that. That's why I like PCC so much, is they're strong on it. Every student goes through origins. This is what God said, and this is how he did it. And then they show them what's wrong with evolution. Gary Parker says, hey, if we did a better job of teaching evolution, less people would believe it. But it's all superficial, and we're going to cover that a bit tonight. And when you're talking to people, you need to define the terms. What do you mean by evolution? Because that word has many meanings. A lot of times they'll say, see how they get big dogs and little dogs? They're changing, and that's one of the things. They're changed. Change over time is evolution. That's true. But that doesn't mean that we came, you know, from a monkey. There's limits to these changes. All right. So they'll say, see, there's a virus. It's resistant. That's evolution, and they'll try and make the students believe that we came from a monkey because of that. Evolution, in its simplest terms, is the belief that hydrogen and helium eventually turn into people. And that's what they believe. It really is. It's the foundation. Okay. And I was at the kiosk one time. I was sitting underneath this banner that said evolution versus science, promoting one of the talks. And a student comes walking by. And he says, stops and he goes, what do you mean? And I said, what do you mean, what do you mean? And he says, evolution is science. How can you have science versus evolution when evolution is science? And so I said, what do you mean by science? And that's a good question. And he says, it's like the laboratory. And I said, oh, you mean like the scientific method, you know, observable, testable, repeatable, falsifiable? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, evolution's none of that. He goes, sure it is. And then I said, well, name an experiment that proves it. Well, and, you know, this was the poster that I was sitting under. And I asked him, you know, what's your best evidence for evolution? And if you ever want to stop a question or a conversation for about 10 seconds, just ask an evolutionist, what's your best evidence? What's the best evidence for evolution? And they'll stop and their eyes will go up and they're trying to remember, why do they believe in evolution? And we give a survey there where we, do you believe in evolution, yes or no? If so, when did you start? And it's typically junior high or high school. And then we ask, what evidence caused you to believe in evolution? And they'll say, well, the science book or science class. And I say, well, what evidence did the science class use to cause you to believe in evolution? Well, the science book. Well, what evidence did the book use? Well, and they really stammer. And the guy I was talking to, his big thing, why did he believe in it? It was the geologic column. I said, you're kidding. Layers of sedimentary rock prove that we came from a rock. That prove that we came from hydrogen and helium. And I said, that could just as well, point to a flood, worldwide catastrophic flood. See, they don't teach that. They can't even talk about that in college. My brother-in-law was at St. Cloud State. He was a hydrology major, so we had a geology class, and they spent a week trying to figure out how the Grand Canyon was formed. And none of the theories worked. And the professor said, there's one theory we haven't talked about. Anybody know? Kid raised his hand and said, Noah's flood. And it got real quiet in the class. And the professor said, you're right, but we can't talk about it. All right? So they won't even let people think about it. Another thing that, and then when I'm still talking with the guy, and we're going back and forth, and he goes, well, what makes the most sense? And I said, exactly. That God created you, or you came from hydrogen and helium? And he goes, yeah, I'll have to think about this. And sometimes that's all you can do with an atheist, is just get them to think. That's a huge victory. Because most of their life, they're just memorizing and conforming what's in the textbook, because they can't see the other side. Another question you can ask is, why did they cut Lucy's hip and twist it to make it look human? It looked like a chimp, but they cut it and they twisted it. And I talked to an anthropology major at St. Cloud State. They don't know that's happened. You come tonight, I'm going to show you the video, In Search of Human Origins. I think it's with Don Johansson. It shows Dr. Lovejoy taking the chimp hip and twisting it so that Lucy can walk upright. And this was the last talk that we gave at St. Cloud State. Are you being brainwashed? Once upon a time, nothing exploded and turned into people. I mean, that's evolution in a nutshell. And this irritates some people. I do some street preaching there sometimes. And that was the one that got them real up. That was the most, an evolutionist walked by, picks it up and throws it. And then a Muslim picked it up and gave it back, a Muslim girl. But it's interesting at St. Cloud State. But that's another talk for another time. And what you can ask them too is, what caused the universe? This is the law of cause and effect. For every effect, there is a cause, and the effect can't be greater than the cause. So what caused the universe? Whatever caused the universe has to be bigger than the universe. And we're going to take a listen to see what Richard Dawkins has to say on this.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else.
Nor has anybody else. Nobody knows how life began. You can ask that question to any atheist. I did it one time, I forget where. I think it was on Facebook or something, and I asked, how did life begin? And they said, well, life began when a comet hit the Earth so many million years ago. And I said, how do you know that? That's an excellent question, too. How do you know that? They don't know that. That's just a figment of their imagination. And so how did life begin? That breaks the law of biogenesis. They have no idea. I've got this textbook here. It talks about all the reasons why life couldn't form on the Earth, and then it's just, in the next paragraph, it says, somehow, despite all the harsh environments, life evolved. Somehow. And we just went from science into fiction in one word. How is its DNA form? This is just a clip of how complex your life, what's happening inside your cells a trillion times over right now.
What you are about to see is DNA's most extraordinary secret. How a simple code is turned into flesh and blood. It begins with a bundle of factors assembling at the start of a gene. A gene is simply a length of DNA instructions stretching away to the left. The assembled factors trigger the first phase of the process, reading off the information that will be needed to make the protein. Everything is ready to roll. 3, 2, 1, go. The blue molecule racing along the DNA is reading the gene. It's unzipping the double helix and copying one of the 2 strands. The yellow chain snaking out of the top is a copy of the genetic message, and it's made of a close chemical cousin of DNA called RNA. You are watching this process called transcription in real time. It's happening right now in almost every cell in your body.
And it's not making mistakes. It's like 1 mistake every 10 billion or something like that. It's incredible. Life is more than chemistry. There's molecular machines going on inside of every cell. You know, Charles Darwin, he thought the cell, when he came up with this theory, he thought that cell was as complicated as a ping pong. And he said, we don't know how it happened because we don't know enough. And now we know enough, and we really don't know how it happened. And that's why the textbook, like I said before, somehow life began. And then how do you know that? You know, how do you know evolution is true? And for this, I go to one of the great philosophers of our time, okay? His name is Tim Hawkins.
Evolution, this I know, for Charles Darwin told me so. Accidentally alive, if you're weak, you won't survive. That's the logic, right? That's what they're saying.
He puts it so eloquently. You know, and that's it. It's survival of the fittest. I mean, why should you love somebody? Why should you be nice? You know, it's competition. I mean, Hitler swallowed this thing, hook, line, and sinker. That's what he was trying to do, make the master race. Okay, how does DNA form? There's no way. Francis Crick, he was the co-discoverer of DNA. He saw how marvelously complex it was. He said, this didn't evolve by chance. So he said, instead of becoming a creationist, he came up with aliens, came from outer space, panspermia. Okay, it just can't happen. How does the information get added to the genome? We'll let Richard Dawkins try to answer this.
Can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Can you just stop one? I think.
Okay, he can't answer it. How does DNA form? How does information get added to the genome? How does matter produce information? They can't answer any of this. If matter is all there is, what are your thoughts? You know, they're just used natural. They just think everything's natural, made up of atoms. Well, then what are your thoughts? You know, what's the meaning of life? You know, if all you are is a bunch of molecules and motions, how can you say anything's right or wrong? I mean, what should you do with your life? And again, now we're going to go to a great theologian of our time, also known as Tim Hawkins.
Reason why we exist, but there's no reason why. Reason why we exist, but there's no reason why.
If it were just a bunch of chemicals, what's the point? This one's hard on evolutionists too. How does a butterfly make it through the chrysalis? And when you look at a butterfly, it starts as an egg, and then it turns into a caterpillar, and then it goes into a chrysalis, and it dissolves itself. And then it comes out as a butterfly. How does that happen over evolutionary processes? Because it has to get all the way through that chrysalis, or it's dead, and the dead things don't reproduce. The butterfly is a huge nightmare for evolutionists. But they don't put that in the textbook. And then how does the 4th generation of butterflies know that they're supposed to go to Mexico? Do you guys get monarchs here at all? Yeah. Okay, they follow the milkweed. They've got that Methuselah generation from the fall to the spring. Everything else dies in like 6 weeks. That one lasts for 6 or 7 months, the Methuselah generation. But they're in Mexico. They just follow the milkweed. When the milkweed are coming up, they're laying their eggs, and then they die. And then the next generation goes up following the milkweeds, lay their eggs, and they die. And the next generation until they get all the way up to Minnesota where we are. And then that generation, they figure out, hey, it's going to get cold somehow. And they all fly back to Mexico. How in the world does the 4th generation know where to go having never been there? If it's all matters and random processes, they should go all over the place, but they go to a specific place, and they just cover the trees like, it's just amazing. You go onto YouTube and see some of these things. When it gets warm enough for them to fly and you make a ruffle, they just, like an avalanche of butterflies coming down on you. Again, where did matter come from? They can't answer that. You can get a lot of thermodynamics, matter and/or energy can't be created or destroyed. So you can take a lot of energy in a particle accelerator and slam them into each other, and you get more matter than what you started. Or you can take a little matter, like an atomic bomb, and you get a whole lot of energy. But you can't just make it out of nothing. And then let's breeze through these. Oh, yeah. Do you treat your spouse and your children like a bunch of random chemicals? See, the evolutionists, they claim that's all we are, but do they go home and treat their wife and spouse that way? Hopefully not. How do you comfort your children? I just had to make a question like this to get this song in.
Like no one loves the little children, all the children of the world. No one hears you when you cry, no one hears your lullaby. No one loves the little children of the world.
I mean, they have atheistic churches now. I'm not sure if you know that, but they have atheist church, atheist summer camps. And I don't know, Tim Hawkins is pretty funny about that. How do planets form? They can't get a planet to form. The theory goes that you have gas turns to dust, turns to pebbles, turns to rocks like this, and turns to planetesimals like an asteroid, turns to planets. The problem is they get to this point and they start banging into each other and falling apart. And there's scientific journals that explain that also. What happens when you die? Again, and I asked evolutionists stuff like this. Well, you're just dead. You're just dead. The great theologian again.
I am an A, I am an A-T, I am an A-T-H-E-I-S-T, and I have N-O-T-H-I-N-G to give me hope and certainty, and when I D-I-E, I will be A-L-O-N-E. Hey!
That's what it is. Once you're done, you're done. And I'm not sure if you saw Bill Nye. He went through the ark with Ken Ham. And Ken Ham asked him, what happens when you die? Nothing. You're done. Well, and then Ken Ham is like, what's the meaning? Everybody it's just, and it's a very bleak outlook on life for Bill Nye. And he's trying to make some great justification for it, but there really isn't any. And what I asked this evolutionists at St. Cloud State, what happens if you die? And, you just go to the ground. And I say, what happens to your spirit? And he goes, there's no such thing. And I'll say, what if you're wrong? You just make them think, what if you're wrong? Do you know everything? They're putting their faith in the scientists. Do the scientists know everything? No. With an atheist, you can ask them, well, let's just pretend you know. Ask them, do you know everything? And they'll say no. Do you know half of everything? And they say no. Well, let's just pretend you know half of everything. Could God exist in the other half that you don't know? And just help them to realize that they're on a pretty shaky foundation. And another thing, how do you determine what's right or wrong? And I have evolutionists say, well, if it does harm, it's wrong, and if it doesn't, then it's good. And I said, so you must be against abortion. Oh, no, I'm not against abortion. Well, doesn't that harm the baby? Well, and it's really an inconsistent worldview. The biblical worldview makes sense. The atheistic worldview, they have to do a lot of mental gymnastics. And then how do you determine right or wrong? And it's based on what standard? Well, I determine my right and wrong. Oh, so can I determine my right and wrong? How about Jeffrey Dahmer? Can he determine his right or wrong? Who knows who Jeffrey Dahmer was? Serial killer, cannibal. He did what he thought was right. How can you say it's wrong? Oh, well, it broke the laws. Okay, well, how about Nazi Germany? They didn't break any laws killing all those Jews. They took away persons. They said Jews are non-persons. You can kill them like vermin and not commit murder. So is society right? You need an absolute standard. And sometimes they'll say there are no absolutes. If you ever hear that, you say, are you absolutely sure? What's he going to say? You know? If he says, yeah, I'm absolutely sure, well, that's an absolute. Or no, he's not absolute. Well, then there could be. You know, sometimes they'll say we can only believe in what we can test with our five senses. And it's like, well, which one of your five senses told you that? Did you feel it? Did you taste it? Did you see it? Did you hear it? You know, no, it's an inconsistent worldview. And then sometimes I'll say there is no truth. And then you say, well, is that true? You know, a lot of their arguments can be, a well-placed question can just have it come crashing down. You can ask him, why didn't Raymond Damadian get the Nobel Prize for medicine? He invented the MRI. They didn't give it to him because he's an outspoken creationist. It's his MRI that's in the Smithsonian, the Indomitable. He was the guy, he was a Christian, then he strayed away at the college, but he had the idea of the MRI, and he needed to make this big magnet, and he needed 150,000 feet of titanium wire, okay? And he only had $15,000, but that's what he needed. And to buy it, he needed 150,000. And he talked to a guy from Westinghouse, and the guy at Westinghouse says, you know, we're getting out of this. We're going to sell it for pennies on a dollar. And he sold it to him for $15,000. All the money he had, gave him everything that he needed, and he saved, you know, $135,000. And he was so excited. And then his mother and father-in-law were saying that they were so excited too. They said because they were praying for your project. So prayer, and then he really began to believe in God. And he began to look into these things. And you know what happened? Why didn't he get the Nobel Prize? Because one of the guys says, you give it to Raymond Damadian, I'm going to refuse it. And they thought that'd be such a scandal for the Nobel process that they said they buckled into that. But this is what Raymond Damadian says, contrary to what Bill Nye says. Bill Nye says we have to teach evolution or we're going to fall behind the other countries.
Hi, my name is Dr. Raymond Damadian. I am a young Earth creation scientist and believe that God created the world in 6 24-hour days, just as recorded in the book of Genesis. By God's grace and the devoted prayers of my godly mother-in-law, I invented the MRI scanner in 1969. The idea that scientists who believe the Earth is 6,000 years old cannot do real science is simply wrong.
Simply wrong. Evolution has nothing to do with science. Nothing. Nothing. And that's what I try and do. I help people figure that out. Science is observable, testable, repeatable. Evolution is not. It's an unsubstantiated belief, conjecture about the past. They have no evidence for it at all. Dr. Gonzalez, we'll talk about him tonight. And that basically, this is what I want to get to. Has anybody ever showed you from the Bible what it takes to go to heaven? And that's the question that I want to get to. You know, once they realize that their foundation is faulty, I want to show them the truth, and that's got to bring me back to the gospel. And I don't ask them, you know, are you going to heaven? You know, I want to, what are you basing it on? And some people have not seen it from the Bible. And when I share the gospel, I use scripture. It's not my words, it's God's word. So there's no misunderstanding terms. And what you can do is you can get equipped. And if there's anybody who really wants to get in the battle, this Mike Riddle, he's doing a creation conference in New Mexico this summer. And he's a Marine, so just think of this as a boot camp. And you're going to practice talking about this stuff. You're going to learn it, and then you're going to present it. So if there's anybody who thinks this might be something they'd want to do, creation training, just search Mike Riddle. And with that, I'll open it up. We got just a couple of minutes. If anybody has any questions, we covered a lot of information.